Nonviolent resistance is a powerful and just weapon. It is a weapon unique in history, which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. It is a sword that heals. Hi there, and welcome to Dunning-Kruger Philosophy, home of oversimplified summaries of complex ideas. Today things are going to be slightly different from the norm, and slightly more serious, as you may have guessed from the opening quote. Martin Luther King Jr. is not a totally unproblematic figure, and in the present day is often co-opted by reactionary and conservative groups. However, there can be no denying the positive impact that he and his thoughts have left upon this world. But he was not alone. There have been many figures like him, both recognised and unrecognised throughout history, and today we're going to discuss some of them and their beliefs. The following episode will serve as an introduction to an upcoming series on a topic I hold very close to my heart: nonviolent resistance. But first things first, what is nonviolent resistance? Well, according to philosopher Todd May, author of Nonviolent Resistance, A Philosophical Introduction, we may define nonviolence as political, economic, or social activity that challenges or resists a current political, economic, or social arrangement whilst respecting the dignity of its participants, adversaries, and others. Don't worry, I will get into the exact details of what that means in later episodes, but for now, we will move on with this as our working definition. Recently, I've come to genuinely believe that nonviolent resistance could be a hugely important means for bringing about a better world. One less rife with bigotry, inequality, and oppression. A world in which we do not need to worry about imminent environmental collapse. A world where our future is bright, hopeful, and where the impossible is made real. Some studies have even suggested that nonviolent resistance movements are twice as likely to achieve their goals as violent ones, whilst also ensuring that there is a much greater chance of long-term stability and prosperity. But before I go any further, I want to add a caveat, one that I think is extremely important we acknowledge, considering the current geopolitical state of the world. This caveat is, I think, summarised well by the following passage from Frantz Fanon's examination of the cycle of violence in colonial Africa, the Wretched of the Earth. Colonialism is not a machine capable of thinking, a body endowed with reason. It is naked violence, and only gives in when confronted with greater violence. When a people are threatened with colonialism and imperialism by an invading force seeking to supplant and replace a people or a nation, when a great power decides that its neighbour is prey upon which to feed, then this supposed prey has every right and justification to use reasonable violence to throw back such predators. Does this mean that a colonial nation cannot achieve its liberation non-violently? Obviously not, as demonstrated by the success of the Indian independence movement. But during an invasion, or the early stages of colonialism, where direct violence is applied at every layer of society, I find it hard to imagine that nonviolent resistance alone could defeat a colonizer's imperialistic ambitions. Though nonviolence can certainly frustrate the ambitions of invading forces, in the midst of World War II, during the German occupation of Denmark, in response to a planned roundup of the Jewish population in 1943, the Danish civilians quickly organised a largely successful escape attempt that rescued the majority of the Jewish population. But for now, I think I've said enough to help you understand my position, if not the nuances that underlie it, and that it would be best if I returned to properly introducing you to this topic. So, as I stated at the beginning of the video, this will serve as an introduction to an upcoming series. Now, as the series progresses, I will return to the subject of the limits of nonviolence by examining the challenge of self-defense. Is it acceptable to harm another in your own defense if there are other options available to you? Or do we counter self-defense? And how do we deal with claims of preemptive self-defense often cited by aggressive imperialistic nations such as Russia or the US as justifications for war? But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, as there are several aspects of nonviolent resistance that need to be tackled. First of which is, what do we mean by nonviolent resistance? What does and does not count as violence, and how do we decide this? I'm sure if you ask some groups of people, they would say civil disobedience that disrupts the infrastructure and economic functions of a city or corporation is violent. I mean, it's often reported that way. Protesters damaging property, it's frequently called violent in the news. These same groups often fail to acknowledge the existence or harm of structural or systemic violence that undermines the capabilities of both the individual and the community. That is often inflicted by the very systems that these protesters seek to change. Why are the actions of one group considered violent and the others considered only as the inevitable consequence of a status quo that cannot possibly be changed? And we shall address all of this in an upcoming video on the definitions of violence and non-violence, which I promise you will be more interesting than that title sounds. There shall also be a video focusing on the importance of non-violent action in tackling global issues such as climate change, in which we will discuss groups such as the Extinction Rebellion who seek to use non-violent resistance as a means to implement radical action in the face of climate change. Though how radical that action truly is in the face of such an unprecedented threat to human life is highly debatable. To give you a gist of my thoughts on some of these matters in advance, I must unfortunately reveal some Kantian aspects of my beliefs. Kant is often viewed as being dry, emotionless, and detached from the realities of lived experience. And to be fair, that often is not too far from the truth. But personally, I find the following quote from the Metaphysics of Morals both aspirational and practical. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. Non-violence of the present day is in many ways grounded in this ideal, that all people should be treated as ends in of themselves, that every human life should be treated in such a way that acknowledges that it has value and dignity by its very nature. This too we shall explore further, as it raises many questions. What do we mean by dignity and value? What counts as life? And given the interconnected nature of this world, how far do we extend this ethic and to who? We will also explore the history of non-violent resistance and civil disobedience, as there is often much we can learn about a movement or an instrument from its past. For example, the practice of ahimsa, or no harm, that has been followed by Buddhists and Jainists of the Indian subcontinent for over 2,500 years, shows us that the roots of non-violent resistance runs deep. So I will be discussing historical and some more recent figures, such as Siddhartha Gautama, Henry David Thoreau, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Corazon Aquino, and Nelson Mandela, to name just a few. There is a long and storied history to this instrument of change, one I would like to dedicate at least one video directly to, though it could very well end up being much more than that. There is a lot of history to cover. But like all instruments of change, it can be used for good or ill. Looks despairingly at the Canadian trucker protest movement of early 2022. Though I would say that ill is much more minimised when compared, say, violent change or revolution, which often becomes trapped in endless cycles of violence. To examine these different topics, I shall try to draw from a wide variety of sources. These will range from modern-day philosophers such as Judith Butler and Todd May, to political scientists like Gene Sharp, along with a variety of other figures such as Frantz Fanon, who I've already mentioned, and Walter Benjamin of the Critique of Violence. Hell, I will even draw upon Sigmund Freud's essay Civilization and Its Discontents, as despite the many memes and jokes I made about it in one of my previous videos, it does actually hold some potentially interesting insights into the nature of violence, hidden amongst all the Oedipus complex stuff. Whilst this is far from an exhaustive list, it will give you a taste of the direction that this series is going. My hope is that throughout the following series, I manage to present both hopeful and pragmatic arguments for the strength of nonviolence, one that does not shy away from its shortcomings. After all, no instrument or belief is without its flaws, but tackles them head on. I am, however, by no means an expert, just an enthusiastic layman who spent probably a bit too much time reading and listening to podcasts of late. This will be just as much of a learning experience for me as it may be for many of you. So I hope you join me on this journey. Though I do not know how long it will take, I think there will be an ample opportunity for us to learn from one another. So if I make mistakes, or you disagree with anything I say or interpret, please let me know in the comments down below, and hopefully together we will come to some sort of resolution that leaves us both satisfied. Plus my algorithm could definitely do with a boost. But before I go, I will leave you with one last quote from another famous, if not totally unproblematic, practitioner of nonviolent resistance, Mahatma Gandhi. Peace cannot be built on exclusivism, absolutism, and intolerance, but neither can it be built on vague liberal slogans and pious programs, gestated in the smoke of confabulation. There can be no peace on earth without the kind of interchange that brings people back to their right mind. This has been Jay from Dunning-Kruger Philosophy, and thank you for watching. I hope to see you all again soon for the next part of this series. Until then, I will share a small reading list down below if anyone is interested in learning more in the meantime. And try to remember, in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace.